Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 8 of the book, our weekly show in which we explore the Bible together and we read it and we just think on it and analyze it, I guess, to the extent that we're capable. And yeah, we just learn from reading it and just putting our thought into it. And if you're watching this, on YouTube, comment whatever you think of whatever of what we share here and of the word and what you have in mind. And if you're watching this live here, as I'm seeing some people in chat here on Hito, and we have Julius and we have Chiso, and yeah, we'll be just be feel free to share whatever comes up in your mind. And this is always a very organic show in which we use the word as a background, a foreground, and then we let our thoughts shape around it. So yeah, thank you everybody for being here. And if you like it, press the like button. If you want to share it with other people. And if you want to see more, just subscribe to the channel, and that way you'll be notified when new videos upload. And now we're gonna get started with Genesis 16 and 17. So after in the previous episode we were seeing how Abram had to go rescue his nephew Lot from some people that were fighting these kingdoms, right? And actually Lot was camped next to Sodom, so that brought him some trouble when Sodom and Gomorrah and their allies lost the war. So then Abram had to take the side of Sodom for the sake of Lot. But then when they win and Sodom is trying to reward him, he doesn't want to accept that. So we were kind of meditating on the fact that evil and good and the actions that we take do not always like come in line with the rewards, I guess, that we get, or the help that we get from God, because God's plans are far above and beyond what we can comprehend. But that whatever the case, that we must always reject that which is evil and its fruits. Let's see here. How goes my friend? Got a bit overwhelmed with the project right now. I was talking to Chiso about it at the beginning of the stream. Just things are starting to ramp up, and there's a lot of issues that need to be resolved. And it's just mostly a time management thing. Just like getting through the days, getting tasks done like this, and then the things of my personal life and stuff. So yeah, it just things pile up. So I gotta remind myself to stay peaceful and to trust. But yeah, it really bothers me when I kind of get things done. So then when the days just pass and I have to spend hours on things and the posting and on social media, and then like I gotta reach out to people and I'm coordinating from the video recording, then things in my personal life and stuff. It's just like a lot of things to do. And then it's like what we've talked about in other streams, how it's like stress starts to show up when you have things to do that you're not doing. So yeah, when you have a lot of things to do, then it's harder to keep the stress down because you cannot handle the workload. But at the end of the day, what frustrates me the most is that I can, but it's easier to get distracted, and then and then it's like more things to do. But yeah, so that's why moments like this are also comforting, to just be able to center around the Word of God, or when I go to Mass and stuff. That's very, very good to just sit down with the Lord and enjoy communion and the Word of God, and this community too as well, to have you guys here and be able to interact and stuff. And so we can all together share life. What translation do you read as a Catholic? Well, I'm not sure which one is best, but right now I'm reading the New American Bible. I've read the King James too in English. In Spanish, I've read the Jerusalem Bible. But yeah, I just go with whatever people, whatever I don't know exactly which one is the best one. Just one that I understand and is approved by the Catholic Church is what I take. And in this case, the New American Bible, because first we started with the Douai something. Is like one of the main translations to English that was done. But it was like the English was tougher. So I changed to the New American Bible, which is much more approachable. You excited for the pre-release? Is everything going to schedule? Oh yeah, I just saw that, Julius. Yeah, I mean, things are going, I don't know what schedule will be, but yeah, things are going well. Just like a lot of issues, not a lot of issues, but just issues that need to be resolved in many different realms. Like, there's the promotion thing, so I gotta get this video done, so I gotta go to these churches to film. So that means I gotta get these permits from the what's it called, the delegation of patrimony from the parishes. And then on top of that, there's the Apple developer account and stuff, which is not really working how it should. And now there's some issues with my name, because on the ID, then Apple the Apple automated thing didn't recognize my last name, because he considered apellidos, which is what he says, just basically says last name on my ID. He thought it was my last name, so he says Gabriel last name Gomez, and it's Gabriel Road Gomez. But whatever the case, just little things like that that need to be resolved. And then yeah, and just the motions of all of this. I think the version I have for the kids is called St. Joseph's version. I have to check again. I grew up with a new NIV. I don't know what that is. New American Bible, Catholic Bible? I never heard of it. Did you mean? Yeah, New American Bible. Yeah, it is. Let me see. I don't know what I found it, but yeah. From my understanding. New American Bible. Yeah, this is from the from the Holy See. So I figured that was pretty official. NAB, New American English translation of the Bible, first published in the 1970s. Based on the dictionary in the Catholic Church, is the only translation approved to use during Mass in the United States. Cool. Gonna check it out. Yeah, and what is the NASB? New American Standard Bible. It's probably the same, yeah. New American Standard. It's probably the same one. Oh, well, this is 77. Maybe it's like I don't know. It's Catholic. Not considered an official Catholic test. So then they standardize it or something. Accuracy in translation still a popular option. Oh, okay. All right, so let's get started with Genesis here. Yeah, sorry, Genesis 16 and 17th, in which now that we moved on from that, we're gonna see how there's some infighting, I suppose, between Sarai and Abram, because Sarah comes up with a great idea because she's like, I'm barren, so how am I gonna have this child? So she comes up with a great idea. We're gonna see it's not so great in the end. There's gonna be some consequences that then God has to sort out. So we can get started now with it. So Genesis 16th. Oh, sorry. I just like learning about new translation, the philosophy behind them, how and why they are made, and the purpose they hope to achieve with them. Yeah, I mean that's a great thing if you're interested in that, and you're very interested in the Bible in general. So yeah, that's something that's cool to explore. So let me know your findings and stuff. It's always good to hear from people that are interested in different fields. Because to me, it's like, yeah, I don't think that much into it, so I just like into different editions and stuff. But that's great. Like it's different, the history, the same way people are interested in aspects of history or aspects of, or not, mathematics or physics or things like that. So it's always good to hear from other people's interests. Okay, Genesis 16. Abram's wife, Sarai, had borne him no children. Now she had an Egyptian maidservant named Hagar. Sarai said to Abram, "The Lord has kept me from bearing children. Have intercourse with my maid. Perhaps I will have sons with her. Perhaps I will have sons through her." Abram obeyed Sarai. Thus, after Abram had lived 10 years in the land of Canaan, his wife Sarai took her maid, Hagar the Egyptian, and gave her to her husband Abram to be his wife. He had intercourse with her, and she became pregnant. As soon as Hagar knew she was pregnant, her mistress lost stature in her eyes. So Sarai said to Abram, "This outrage against me is your fault. I myself gave my maid to your embrace, but ever since she knew she was pregnant, I have lost stature in her eyes. May the Lord decide between you and me." Abram told Sarai, "Your maid is in your power. Do to her what you regard as right." Sarai then mistreated her so much that Hagar ran away from her. The Lord's angel found her by a spring in the wilderness, the spring on the road to Shur, and he asked, "Hagar, maid of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going?" She answered, "I am running away from my mistress Sarai." But the Lord's angel told her, "Go back to your mistress and submit to her authority. I will make your descendants so numerous," added the Lord's angel, that they will be too many to count. Then the Lord's angel said to her, You are now pregnant and shall bear a son. You shall name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heeded your affliction. He shall be a wild ass of a man, his hand against everyone, and everyone's hand against him. Alongside all his kindred shall he encamp. To the Lord who spoke to her she gave a name, saying, You are God who sees me. She meant, Have I really seen God and remained alive after he saw me? That is why the well is called Bir Lahai Roi. It is between Kadesh and Beret. Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram named the son whom Hagar bore him Ishmael. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore him Ishmael. Genesis 17. When Abram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to Abram and said, I am God the Almighty. Walk in my presence and be blameless. Between you and me I will establish my covenant, and I will multiply you exceedingly. Abram fell face down, and God said to him, For my part, here is my covenant with you. You are to become the father of a multitude of nations. No longer will you be called Abram, your name will be Abraham, for I am making you the father of a multitude of nations. I will make you exceedingly fertile. I will make nations of you. Kings will stem from you. I will maintain my covenant between me and you and your descendants after you throughout the ages as an everlasting covenant, to be your God and the God of your descendants after you. I will give to you and to your descendants after you the land in which you are now residing as aliens, the whole land of Canaan as a permanent possession, and I will be their God. God said to Abraham, For your part, you and your descendants after you must keep my covenant throughout the ages. This is the covenant between me and you and your descendants after you that you must keep. Every male among you shall be circumcised. Circumcise the flesh of your foreskin. That will be the sign of the covenant between me and you. Throughout the ages, every male among you, when he is 8 days old, shall be circumcised, including house-born slaves and those acquired with money from any foreigner who is not of your descendants. Yes, both the house-born slaves and those acquired with money must be circumcised. Thus my covenant will be in your flesh as an everlasting covenant. If a male is uncircumcised, that is, if the flesh of his foreskin has not been cut away, such a one will be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. God further said to Abraham, As for Sarai, your wife, do not call her Sarai. Her name will be Sarah. I will bless her, and I will give you a son by her. Her also will I bless. She will give rise to nations, and rulers of peoples will issue from her. Abraham fell face down and laughed, as he said to himself, Can a child be born to a man who is 100 years old? Can Sarah give birth at 90? So Abraham said to God, If only Ishmael could live in your favor. God replied, Even so, your wife Sarah is to bear you a son, and you shall call him Isaac. It is with him that I will maintain my covenant as an everlasting covenant, and with his descendants after him. Now as for Ishmael, I will heed you. I hereby bless him. I will make him fertile and will multiply him exceedingly. He will become the father of 12 chieftains, and I will make him a great nation. But my covenant I will maintain with Isaac, whom Sarah shall bear to you by this time next year. When he had finished speaking with Abraham, God departed from him. Then Abraham took his son Ishmael and all his slaves, whether born in his house or acquired with money, every male among the members of Abraham's household, and he circumcised the flesh of their foreskins on that same day, as God had told him to do. Abraham was 99 years old when the flesh of his foreskin was circumcised, and his son Ishmael was 13 years old when the flesh of his foreskin was circumcised. Thus, on that same day, Abraham and his son Ishmael were circumcised, and all the males of his household, including the slaves born in his house or acquired with his money from foreigners, were circumcised with him. All right, a lot of circumcision going on. Well, there we have it. So, what do we have here? Well, first of all, from this, what I drew, well, I mean, just this story I was more familiar with than what we saw in other chapters that I didn't quite recall as much. The idea of, the birth of Ishmael from Hagar and coming from the distrust of Sarah or Sarai at that point. But it's still interesting to see the fact. It's like so funny that she's the one that comes up with the idea and then she just gets upset. She's like, this outrage against me is your fault. I find that line funny. It's like, yeah, but it's almost like, yeah, I guess it is it is his fault for saying yes to the idea. It's kind of, it reminds me also of the thing with the apple with Adam and Eve. And then it's like as soon as both of them, move away from the Lord and his promises, they both kind of blame each other in some sense. And then they don't want to deal with the repercussions, because then when Sarah is like, this is your fault, I gave you the maid, yes, but now things haven't turned out the way I wanted, so do something about it. May the Lord decide between you and me. And then Abram is like, I don't want to deal with this. It's your maid. You do as you feel is right. And then again, that causes more issues, because then Sarah is just not doing the right thing. Then Hagar runs away, and the Lord has to intervene and be like, go back, go back to the household, and I'll bless you with descendants, and and you have a great nation under you as well. So it's God once again that has to kind of reshape everything to fit our mistakes and our distrust. So that's what I draw mostly from this. And then it's like the idea that we don't see yet the birth of Isaac, but that God maintains the covenant regardless, without by adding. It's always like a creative effort. It's not like a destructive effort, which is like, oh, all right, well, then we got to just get rid of Abraham and of Sarah and all this whole thing because they messed up the plan. It's kind of like the plan takes a deeper shape, or a more complete and complex form. And then it's like, okay, so you decided to have this child with with Hagar. So now both of them will be within the promise, because of the thing. It's like the descendants, both of them will be fathers of great nations. But it's like the complexity has kind of doubled now by this, but none of it has altered in that sense. Not altered, yeah, it has altered the way things are going to work out, but not the promise itself. The promise of God continues, to remain steady. And that just reminds me in life how many times, we even sometimes make those covenants with God, and we make promises, even just with baptism, or with communion, or when we go to reconciliation, or in general in life, and we feel like that trust, like how we saw Abraham. It's funny too, because I didn't remember how many, it's interesting to see how many times Abram doubts God, even though, but then also how many times he just is like, no, I trust you, I trust you, okay, so you're gonna make plenty of descendants for me, okay, and then puts face down on the ground, and then he's like, all right, I trust you, and then that's seen as righteous from the Lord, because it's like, in the sense, like, he's not lying, he really does believe God and trust him in that moment. But then life passes, and then we forget, and then we're just like, oh no, wait, how am I gonna have a son, if my wife is not, if my wife is barren? So it's like we start thinking in our own scale, like God cannot just fix all of that, and we start to measure life and be like, well, how am I gonna get this figured out if this and this and this is like. And then it's like that uncertainty, which is here, it's like things are clearer, I suppose, I mean, not even I suppose it's like clear because we have this like clear character of the Lord, right? And we're like, how can you miss us? You know, it's like the Lord is speaking to you and telling you, you know, you will have descendants. So it's like, why doubt it? If he's telling you you're gonna have those descendants, why make that mistake? But it's in because but this is written, you know, in retrospect, and it's also like, you know, in a very direct way. So it's telling the story that so it's clear when we see it in perspective, the same way when we can look back in our lives, I think, and see how it's like, oh yeah, yeah, that was there the whole time, and I just didn't see it, or I didn't want to see it. But when you're in the midst of it, it's easy. I think it makes sense to relate to Abraham and how he feels. At least I do, which is like it does. It's like the clarity is there when we want to see it. In that sense, it's like we do hear the voice of God in those moments of faith and of actually encountering it. But we just doubt it. We just later on are like, oh, you know, didn't he really say that? You know, did God really promise me that? Did I, you know, it's like because I didn't hear a voice coming from the sky, but we weren't thinking like that when we first felt that embrace, right, of God. We didn't feel like a need for a special light or anything like that. We just felt it, and we did. There was no. I mean, at least from my experience, like in those moments I've had of closeness of intimacy with God, it's not been, and I didn't feel like I needed more. I didn't feel like, oh, I don't trust this. But then it's later on that it's like as things settle, you start to be like, maybe now, maybe he wasn't saying that. Maybe I just was dreaming. Maybe I wanted to hear that. You know what I'm saying? And it's so tough because it's like it's almost like it's similar to when Abraham here or with Adam and Eve. It's like they start the blame game and the weak game. You know, so it's like, oh, you put the serpent here, you know, and she offered me the fruit, and you know, and it's your servant. You deal with it. It's like that kind of attitude of because we want to find an explanation for the fact that we ourselves distrusted what we once held so dear, right? And yeah, but it's like I've always find that also I've always found the character of Ishmael interesting. So I'm like, what is he to represent? You know what I'm saying? Like who like it's you know not even represent, but who is he the ancestor of? You know what I'm saying? Because from Isaac comes the tribes of Israel, and then that's where comes the you know the Hebrews, right? The Jewish people from which you know Jesus comes and we come, and then we become adopted sons of Abraham, the Gentiles, right? I would be on on the Gentile side, I suppose. Uh, I mean, anybody from the European nations or anything like that, or anybody that has converted to the faith, or is a descendant of those that have converted to the faith, which also brings to light the idea of the circumcision, which had been that covenant that God makes with Abraham, but then with the arrival of Christ, and there's that kind of it was a very contentious issue, right, between the apostles and the first Christians. Is like you know whether circumcision was required, and how kind of Saint Paul fights for the Gentiles in that respect, and the idea that you know those covenants were to bring this end of times, this you know moment of glory of fruition of all these promises that come with Christ, and then this new covenant that is made through Christ, which is God Himself. So it kind of fulfills it all and starts anew, but in a consistent way. It doesn't. That's why it's like Jesus says it too. And it's not breaking away from the law. It's not breaking the old covenant and making a new one. It's fulfilling the covenant and in the same line, starting a new one. But yeah, the idea that if you or at least that's where how I see it, and you guys can let me know how you guys see it. But you know, the idea of the circumcision being a mark in a time in which it was very different times. I would suppose. I mean, I imagine that they were very different times. No, it's not hard to imagine. So the fact that you know those people, the way they were united, the fact that they could recognize themselves as part of the same people, and those that follow the law of God, the covenant, the trust in the Lord, will be through the circumcision, because it's like it's a clear mark, it's a clear ritual at the beginning of your life, or you know, or when you become part of the tribe in that sense, like those slaves, like they talk about that they're purchased through money, because it's also like those, you know, in times of war and stuff, in those times, it's like you would acquire slaves as well in times of war. So it's kind of a form of adoption into the tribe. And then I wonder, yeah, how it would work with with marriages or any type of other union with people from outside of the tribe of Abraham. But the fact that they're marked by that makes them in the flesh, uh, makes it in the flesh a clear uh, covenant, a clear indication of who they belong to. They belong to God. It's kind of how you, well, I mean, I'm not saying it's obviously the same as cattle, but it serves the same purpose as when you mark cattle, right? It's like, and the way of marking and marking that belonging to the tribe, to the people of God, is through the circumcision. So there's a lot of here elements that like are at the same time hard for me to translate to how things are now, because it's a different time with different needs for the people, like a different way that God has to educate them and shape them and keep them together. The same way, it was the people of the people after Adam and Eve needed a different type of education, in that sense, a different type of guidance, to the point that they were so deviated from God that they needed a whole cleansing through the deluge, through the flood. And then even after that, with Noah's sons, it's like they need a different type of treatment. I mean, and you could even argue the harshest treatment was at the very beginning with Adam and Eve, because it was at the very moment that sickness, that sin enters us. So there's like extreme measures must be taken so that we can correct the course. So then we are expelled from Eden, and we are, the woman is to suffer to give birth, and the man is to suffer to make a living and stuff. It's like those are like very dramatic changes if you think about it, from like Adam and Eve being just enjoying life in the care of God. It's just like not having to worry about anything and just enjoying, not having shame or anything like that. And then all of a sudden, there's a huge shift in the things they got to deal with, which is why I think it's easy to fall into the temptation. I think that it's a punishment in the sense of like God just finds pleasure in just making us pay for a mistake. But if you really analyze it, in my opinion, it's pretty apparent that it's a medicine. It's just like a painful medicine because it's a serious illness. But now we see, it's like kind of as we progress now through Genesis, we see how the medicine it's milder every time. I mean, if you look at it relative to how it started, it is milder every time, but it's still, from our perspective, especially because we're not even in the same process as these people are, in the sense of regaining the trust in God, regaining the ability to let go of our own machinations, our own way. We're already, we are saved in Christ, so it's like it's a very privileged position we have for us to now examine these events in our history, these events in like this is the very beginning of the covenant in that sense. It's like, so it's easy to be like, what is it, like what is the point of circumcision, or why do that, or why have slaves, or why these things. But it's like, it's not that God is approving of these things. It's the same way he didn't approve of us eating out of the apple, but it's like we continue to make a mess of things, and then God has to bring those things to their natural course and then allow them to direct themselves, which again, the flood being a milder correction than the expulsion from Eden. And then this, the idea of bringing Ishmael back into the household and making a nation out of him, and the circumcision mark and all that being a much milder measure to continue to educate, continue to shape that people through a very complicated context, because we think of all the other nations that are around, all the other civilizations with completely different belief systems, with very common human sacrifices all along the Canaanites, all along the people around the Babylonians, like the Egyptians. They're all these people just do very different, and what we consider now like very, I mean, they were back then, but it was also normal, like depravities and things that we think just inconceivable now in our privileged perspective of after having thousands of years of Christianity being fed to us, and thankfully so, because then, it's harder, much harder. I find it hard, very hard, to put things into perspective and look at this and see the generous and merciful hand of God using the elements that are present at that time, and correcting us towards a better way of living, a better way of trusting. So yeah, that's kind of what I see so far. But again, that's why I kind of keep going back and forth, because it's hard to grasp, and it's also hard to grasp it all because I continue to think of the idea of Ishmael, right? And it's like he blessed him, but then he's like, he shall be a wild, it says it right here, he shall be a wild as of a man, his hand against everyone, and everyone's hand against him. It's like you cannot really, the same way with the flood. It's like the flood being the consequence of our sin. It's a necessary part of the correction. At the same time, it doesn't make it less painful or less terrible in that sense. But so it's also, it doesn't make it less terrible than now this son that I guess you could say shouldn't have been born, but it does not. I mean, there's no way to define should or shouldn't, because if it did happen, then it was meant to happen in that respect. Like, just not meant like God written that way, but more like God allowed us to write it, and then we wrote it that way. So it's like Abraham and Sarai Abram and Sarai wouldn't have made a different decision because the circumstances would have been exactly the same. So they would have arrived at the same conclusion. So it's kind of, things have to play out the way they have to. And so Ishmael is born, and it is necessary for him to be born to, in the sense, because the doubt that comes from Sarah and the doubt that comes from Abram is personified in the person of Ishmael. But at the same time, if it would have been better, it would have been ideal, it would have been perfect in that sense, that Sarai didn't mistrust, that Abram didn't let Sarai's mistrust, also, I mean, also his own mistrust. I mean, we see it even later, right? When they make this mess with Ishmael, but still they think that they were right to some extent, you know what I'm saying? Is that it creates this infighting between them two. It makes Sarai like mistreat Hagar and expel Ishmael and Hagar out of her household. Then they come back from the hand of the Lord, right? So I imagine that they talk about this or something in between them. I mean, when Hagar comes back with Ishmael, she probably said, the Lord brought me back. I mean, but again, I'm not trying to, but I just, even if we leave that aside, the fact that she just came back, right? And now she's back in their household. And now Abraham, it's like we continue to see in him, or I continue to see in him, our own attitude of like, the moment things are apparent, the moment things have played out, it becomes a new reality and we have no problem accepting it. But we just have a hard time understanding the power of God. Not even understanding, but trusting the power of God and being like, because he's like, when he says, you will be the father of many nations, and from Sarai, he laughs, you know what I'm saying? He's kind of like, he's laughing at God, he's laughing at the idea that from Sarai could come. And it's so absurd because, again, from this privileged perspective, for him to not believe that, it's like, haven't you seen how much he's blessed you? And the fact that it's like, it's God, it's like, what does it matter if she's barren or not? God is telling you that you're going to have a son from Sarah. What is there to doubt about it? Because we are seeing, he's seeing it from his perspective. But then what he uses as something that is like, oh, okay, but the way it's going to work out is because I have Ishmael, right? Which you already know that was, is something that moved you away from the Lord. But again, God in his mercy, he's not going to make Ishmael pay for this, or Hagar, and be like, okay, well, because he could have left them die in the desert and be like, okay, I'm not going to make my covenant with Ishmael, I'm making it with Isaac. I'm going to have a son from Sarai for Abraham. So then, what's the point of saving Ishmael? But it's like, what is the blame on Ishmael? So in the same way with, even with Cain, which is an interesting thing too that we saw in the past, which is like Cain's evil doesn't come from his own actions. It comes from the actions of his parents, right? The fact that they ate of the fruit put the seed of evil in him. So even though he made the decision of killing Abel, God still puts his seal on him. And he's like, no, but you still, son of God, and nobody should touch you. You shouldn't be killed by other people in retribution for this. So the same thing here. It's like Ishmael is the consequence of sin in that respect, or the consequence, of distrust, of moving away from God. But he's not to pay for it because it's not his fault. And even though the Lord is saying it, so it's not like, he's saying that he will be a wild ass, he will be against everyone. So you could say, then what's the point of letting him live, right? But it's the fact that he's the consequence of somebody else's sin. And we're all the consequence of an original sin, which is the point of why baptism is so relevant and so important, is the fact that we are finally, through Christ, freed from that blame, which also gives a lot, which also makes us very responsible for things. It's like, because up to that point, we're not. You could always say, I'm just the son of Adam. It's like I'm just born of original sin. So it's like, of course I'm gonna kill and murder and sin and all of this. It's like, sure, the Lord is helping me and stuff, but I continue to have this urge, and there's no way out of it. You know what I'm saying? It is in my nature, my sinful and tainted nature to sin. So you can even use that. But the moment that Christ is here and you have the option of ascribing to him in body and soul, take his spirit, eat of his flesh and drink of his blood, and become him, and let Christ live in you, and let him and his Father abide in you and the Holy Spirit. There's really no way out, which also is, again, goes back to the responsibility. That's why the judgment comes. That's why we are much more responsible for our actions, I could say, than these people in the like than Cain. You know what I'm saying? Because Cain didn't have that privilege that we do have. Cain didn't have the privilege of being able to ascribe himself to God himself and let God abide in him. So I think that's also the important thing of God's mercy comes through Christ. God's mercy comes in the fact that all he's asking us to do is to believe in his Son and to take part in him, let him act in us. And then he's like, all the mistakes that you make, all the mistakes that you've made, which are born of the original sin, are and can be forgiven. All you got to do is ask for that forgiveness. All you got to do is let us dwell in you, and then everything will be resolved. So it's much more, it's graver, I think, or at least that's how I see it, to then reject that, you know what I'm saying? And that's where I think the point of hell is in that respect, is where we go in that ultimate rejection of God's mercy, in which God is like, kind of same thing with the flood, right? It's like, there's not anything else I can do about these people. Like, they are going to continue down this road, and they've gotten to an irrevocable point, to the sense like there's no other option they will have after this decision. If at the very moment of death, right, after all your lifetime of choices, or your lifetime of chances of being exposed to the gospels and stuff, you continue to reject it, then you are yourself walking yourself down to the pit. So there's not much else that God can do. And not only that, but he's done everything. He's done everything for you, and you still continue to reject it. So yeah, and again, very different paradigm, I think, from somebody who is not exposed. You could consider these people in the Old Testament and their actions the same as people that have never heard the gospel. God is much more merciful in that respect, and much more active, which is why it's like in the Old Testament we see these very direct actions from God, because those people haven't had the privilege of taking part in the church, of being in communion with Christ and with communion with God, being adopted sons of God. So yeah, but again, with our nature continues to come to the surface. This reminds me too, I saw recently an interview, well, actually just a clip of an interview that the guy from Pines with Aquinas has with some guy. Again, I'm sorry, I don't have the whole context because I didn't watch the full interview or anything, but it was this guy, I suppose it was like an expert in the Eucharist and stuff, and he was talking about, why is it that when I go to Mass, right, if God himself is there, if Christ is there in body and flesh and blood, why don't I feel like, something like, like, well, when Moses goes to the mountain and sees God, or, when this moments of revelation, when St. Paul sees Christ, or it's like, it's right there, right? It's like we're saying that he's there in physical presence. So why don't I feel anything interesting? And his response, I thought, was great. I mean, I think I ascribe to that response that I never thought about in that respect, which is the idea that if it was a sensory thing, right? If it was something that you just feel like, oh, a high, and you just feel like, oh, wow, and it's something that overtakes you in that respect, that it's not something that you choose, to take that as truth, but that it's just imposed in you, that the moment you enter the church, right, and it's Christ there, then you just are taken over by this feeling, by this presence, then you would lose that freedom. You will lose, you will just be there for the sensation. It would be like an addiction to the sensation. You would be coming to church to feel God, taking your life and not giving you any room for your own choices. So even though it's much harder, because now you have to make the decision of having faith in that reality, even though your senses don't aid you in it at all. That is the point. The point is that you are making the decision, that you are freely believing God without the aid of natural senses, right? And And it goes back to that, which is it's all God wants, and all we need to do is say yes, is trust God once again, so that we can learn to be back to the nature that we were meant to be, which is the one it needed. Because it's like we are all once again in that presented with that same choice. That's why it's like it wouldn't matter if by the very censors, if by the censors, I don't know, if God just came down and it's like, I am real, I'm gonna save you or I'll put you back in Eden, right? Because then what would it matter if us we haven't learned to just trust the Lord in these circumstances? Then what makes us think that once we're in Eden, we're not gonna eat of the fruit again? Like the moment that just we are given the opportunity, we will, because we're saying, oh, unless God comes and holds us down, and just forces us basically to obey, we will not obey that. Because if you're given the opportunity now to be like, I will believe, and it's like, then I will believe freely, right? So then it's like, then do it now. And then when you're in heaven, God won't need to be imposing you, because you've gone through the process of believing in the moment that Eden wasn't present. So when you get to Eden, the fruit, the apple can be there once again, and you will choose not to eat it. If that was the case, obviously I'm not saying heaven is that, because we're way beyond that. We're now adopted sons, that we will be eating of the tree of eternal life. We've already eaten of the tree of good and evil. So but it's the idea of that, of true obedience, of true trust, in which there's no need for God to overtake us, or to force us into anything. So yeah, I don't know what else to say here. Then there's the circumcision, right? We got here, we changing names. We got an image here, let's check it out. Not this one. Even like in the choice, take this way. Something like that. But yeah, a multitude of nations. Kings will stem from you. Crazy how things have played out since then, huh? A multitude of nations. This will be a sign of the covenant between me and you. God, and then the change of names. Let me see, because there's some footnotes here. Let's see, for example, with the first one. I like the footnotes here, and they're like interesting. Abram and Abraham are merely two forms of the same name, both meaning the father is exalted. Another variant form is Abiram. The additional he in the form Abraham is explained by popular etymologists, coming from Abrahamon Goim, father of a multitude of nations. So it would be multitude, it would be kind of like, because it's a multitude of nations. How do they differ visually? Oh, look at the paths. Realize how it portrays. Oh, let me see. Well, I mean, there's trees here. I guess there's a storm here. More like this cloudy skies. And then not so cloudy over here. Is it a higher road here? Is this a higher road? They seem kind of same level. Well, this is a wider way too, no? This is narrower. Is that it? And it's narrow and it's broad. Yeah. Yeah. It makes sense too when I remember. Oh wait, I shouldn't have closed that whole thing. It was the Twitch controller. But I gotta fix this OBS thing. But yeah, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, when I heard that thing, I used to think it's like, oh, why make it harder? But it's not even that it's harder. It's just more accurate. You know what I'm saying? The narrower way is just basically you're doing more things right. You are constraining yourself to the law of God. It's kind of like there's only 1 6, and then there's an infinity of other numbers. For example, 1 7. It's like there's only one answer, and then the rest is just chaos. So there's always, like, chaos has by need has to be larger and broader in nature than form and order, because order forms things from chaos. So then what surrounds it is chaos. So by the virtue of being the surrounding, by the virtue of being chaotic, has to be broader. So it's like when in the Bible it says, you know, it's like the way is narrow and the gate is narrow, whatever, and not many people get through it. It's not that it's excluding anybody. It's that by the virtue of it being ordered, of being one form, the perfect form, it has to be narrow, you know, because it's formed out of any other imperfection possible, any other possibility. You know, the one number in the lottery that wins is one, you know. So the way you were saying, Matthew 7, 13, 14. Is that what I was saying, the narrow is the way and all of that? Let me see. Narrow, down, 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 down. Matthew 7. Do you know these things by heart? I always find it impressive when people know these things by heart. Screaming Telegram. Let's get this bot out of here. The narrow and wide gates. Enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. Small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. Yes, makes sense. All right, let's see what else. Circumcision was widely practiced in the ancient world, usually as an initiation rite for males at puberty. By shifting the time of circumcision to the 8th day after birth, biblical religion made it no longer a rite of passage, but a sign of an eternal covenant. No, so circumcision was already there. Sorry, I'm not entirely. I know the scripture, but I have to look up the verse numbers. Got it. Yeah, I mean, I don't even know like literally, but yeah, I can think of things from just reading them, remembering them. But when people just quote them like that, I'm like, oh, I have no idea how to quote things. Like I don't know what gospel is most of the times when I think of things. Abraham was given a timetable of possession of the land. Wait, what is the Wadi? Oh yeah, we saw that. That's from chapter 15, when 16, 17. The previous chapter, Abraham was given a timetable of possession of the land, but nothing was said about when the child was to be born. In this chapter, Sarah takes matters into her own hands, for she has been childless 10 years since the promise. Yeah, that's what I mean. Like it's so relatable, bro. Like I cannot even take a whole month without being again, not even a whole month, not even a week, not even a day without being to God. You know, it's like you said this, you know, you said you're gonna take care of things, and now look at me. Now I have all this mess and that stuff, and when is it gonna happen? You know, when is this that I'm supposed to wait for gonna happen? Bro, Sarah was waiting for 10 years, and then she's like, okay, I'm gonna take matters in my hands. It's like, it's understandable, although it's wrong, you know, go back to, it's like, you still gotta, you know, hold fast and trust, but it's like, bro, things like that, it's like we are tested to that extent, which I don't think is, I think is obviously, I mean, it's God's way and it's the right way, and again, looking at it from an external perspective, from a point of privilege, is it's easy to be like, well, why did she distrust? But it's like, bruh, 10 years. Like even that, the fact that the Bible tells the stories, and it's yeah, the fact that it's the fact that it's divine word is shown by these things. But they could have omitted that if they wanted things to look better for us. But it's like you know, like the people of Israel continuing to narrate their own mistakes in detail in that respect. Do I preach? What does that mean? Do I preach? I don't preach. I hope not. I hope I don't preach. I don't like preaching. I don't like people that preach. But I don't know. Maybe I'm not understanding the word preaching correctly. But yeah, how would you define preaching? Stories about the two women, Sarah, the infertile mistress, and Hagar, the fertile slave. Even has only a single sentence. I don't know. Was the Catholic woman or pastor minister? Oh, if I'm a priest? No, I'm not a priest. I have an opinion. Don't. Yeah, I have an. What do you mean? On this? Or you mean like on preaching? Well, my opinion on preaching is that nobody should preach. You should just live and share. So yeah. But again, I don't know if the definition of preaching is broader than I imagine it. Like I think the point of a priest is to celebrate and study in general. Yeah, I mean, sure. I mean, we all have opinions, right? Who was that? There was a quote from somewhere that said that. Or is it Groucho Marx that says it? You know. Let me make a wood box for you to drag out to the corner. I'm confused. So you can stand on it. Okay. I don't get the joke, Jesus. I know you guys put traditions, we're not, and we're not very specific on the patterns and order of it. You mean like how we do like how ritualistic we are in the Eucharist? Yeah, I think that's important to keep things in shape because it's not easy to be a priest. Yeah, so exactly. Yeah, so I guess I mean the pastor I think is considered in English soapbox preacher. Yeah, I don't quite get it. How's it going, Kishwan? But yeah, so basically a priest is one that is ordained able to consecrate the body and the blood, like bread and wine into the body and blood of Christ, and to be able to forgive sins, to be able to ordain the priest, and to basically just celebrate the sacraments. But then a pastor will be, from my understanding of English, the priest that runs a parish. So it's more of a role that comes as a result of being a priest. And then the idea of a preacher is the one that I don't quite understand. I don't know if all priests are considered preachers because they preach in the sense like, again, I don't, is preaching just announcing the gospel or talking about it? Because then I guess we all are preachers by the virtue of being Christians, at least if you're Catholic, because you are baptized, a prophet, a priest, and a king. So then we all are priests in that respect. We all preachers because we are all called to share the gospel. But that's why I'm not quite understanding what you when you ask. Because what I would understand when you ask the question, am I a preacher, is if I just go around and make events or and preach. So I mean, I don't know. Technically, I could be considered a preacher because I'm here reading the Bible online. But really, all I'm trying to do here is not preach to anybody. Like I'm not trying to read the Bible to you guys. I'm just reading the Bible because I want to read it, and I just share it with you guys because that's the part of the community, like the part of just being with other people and doing it together. But yeah, that's also why when I talk about Christianity, these things, or this channel, it's not about me. Oh, let me start a Twitch channel so I can convert people to Catholicism. It's just me being like, look, I'm Catholic. I'm here trying to make this up because I want to make it. And then yeah, might as well just say that I'm Catholic since I'm making a prayer up to as well. What's going on for today? Just reading Genesis, like the show that we have here on Mondays, the book that we just read Genesis together. Well, read the Bible together. Right now we're reading through Genesis, and today we were exploring how Sarah, Abraham's wife, takes matters into her own hands, like it says here, because they've been promised a child and she's barren, and so she just like, oh, okay, so have a child with my slave, but that's not how God intended it. So things don't really play out well, and then there's like infighting between Sarah and Hagar, the slave through which Abraham has the son, and then God kind of has to bring everything back together and be like, and blesses Ishmael, which is the son of Abraham and Hagar. But then also he's like, Abraham, look, what I told you is that you're gonna have a son with Sarah, and I'll make a covenant with him, and his name will be Isaac. So just trust me, and things will work out. Never ran into them in New York. Soapbox preacher. Yeah, so it would be kind of what I'm saying, like kind of a guy just yelling on the street. I even find it sometimes here, like just being like, "You gotta convert to Christ." Yeah, that's what I would understand. Because yeah, like that's what I understand as a preacher. So I'm like, I don't think I'm a preacher. I hope not. Say I don't want to be a preacher. Just like telling people you have to convert to Christ, come to Christ, and all that. It's like I don't find that. I don't think that's what God even wanted us to do. It's just I think what wanted us to do is to live the truth and share it, not to try to pressure people into coming to it or yell it at their face or anything like that. I never asked if you were a preacher. I asked if you do it. Yeah, that's what I mean. I don't. What will be the difference? What a Catholic would call it sometimes, who gets up at church and leads the sermons. Yeah, that would be a priest. Only a priest gives sermons. So in Catholic Mass, only the priest reads the gospel, and only the priest gives sermons. So only the ordained priest can do that. Then there's lectors, which are people that read. So I'm a lector many times at my church, basically reading the readings that come before the gospel. So usually on a weekday, you read one reading from the Bible, one psalm, and not the whole psalm, and also not, like the reading is an excerpt from the Bible, and then an excerpt from the Gospels that is read by the priest. Well, that's typical in the U.S. which like you kind of shown with your reaction, Catholics will get all fussy if you use the wrong word if it doesn't fit it. Not really. It's just not. Again, it's not fussy. I'm not fussy. It's just like I don't know exactly how to define it correctly. So it's just to be accurate of when you say preacher, is more also an understanding of the language for me, not being my first language. So when I hear preach or preacher, I just the image of like one of those guys, like how Chiso was saying, just on the street, just yelling or telling people this and that. So that's why it's like, I don't think that. I'm Spanish, yeah, Spanish from Spain. They do it all the time, especially university campuses. Yeah, and it's like I respect it in the sense like if people feel the call to do that. I'm not saying they're wrong in that sense. Like who am I to judge them or their actions, and especially when they're speaking of Christ. It's just to me, I definitely don't feel called to do something like that. I'd rather just, but and also I don't think it's what God wants. But again, I'm not judging them, and it's like they will make their own decisions about that, which is also why I think, and I think it creates a lot of confusion. Even my position here, I try to be careful not to like to remind people that I'm just talking about how I see things. I'm not speaking in the name of the Catholic Church or speaking in the name of Christ or anything like that, because that's I think the thing that so many Protestants don't like, but that is the point of what you consider the censorship of the Catholic Church, which is not censorship. It allows everybody to talk, but it's kind of like what is considered dogma, or using the right words or using the right rights, is basically to protect the truth. Because if not, I can just get exactly on top of a cardboard box and start saying things and be like, "Oh, this is how I see things," and then people believe that this is what the word of God is, or that is. But things have to be consistent with the rest, with consistent with what other people have said in the past, and there has to be a continuity. So the people that should be speaking are people that have studied it, people that have dedicated their lives to it, and that therefore that's why only a priest would give sermons, only a priest would read the Gospels and interpret them, because they've been given authority by the church to do so, so as to keep things in order, and so that people don't start coming up with their own personal interpretations that are usually tainted by their personal experiences. And even then, those are just measures to try to contain it. It can still happen that a priest makes the mistake of putting themselves in the gospel. Levels of patience in reconciling the differences between what others think and what Catholics actually believe. Yeah, you ever thought about it? You have a good voice and mannerisms for it. About being a priest? Yeah, I've thought about it. Some ladies tell me doing church sometimes, as I go to church so much. I want you to become a priest. I'm like, I don't know, that's not what it calls me to. Yeah, no. No, I want to have a family and have, I just want to be a saint in that sense, but a saint from the other side of the altar, you know what I'm saying? Just, I want to participate in the Eucharist and participate in the Christian life, in the Catholic life, be a follower of Christ and try to live my life by that as much as possible. But a priest is a very different thing, it's like, not very different in the sense like it's a tough commitment, first of all. And it's also, you got to be called to just not want to have a family, and also just want to, be married to the church fully, commit yourself to the service of others to that extent. I'm just not, I don't feel the call to do that. I want to be more in the world in that sense. Like I want to create and, yeah, and again, have a family and just be part of the people, because I think it's what is needed more. Like I think that's also why I tell these old ladies when I tell them, I'm like, they're like, oh, the church needs more priests. I'm like, I don't think so. I think the church needs more people to go to church. So I'm gonna just go to church, and be closer to God from my perspective, be in the midst of the world and working and making money, making a company, making jobs, having being an entrepreneur, I guess you can call it, being a creator, making video games and stuff, but being present with God, you know what I'm saying? Doing that alongside Christ, having a Christian family, a saint, holy family, but are you ready to? Many chiefs. Many chiefs? What do you mean? How's it going, Kiss One? Oh, yeah, sorry. I just saw that. You were here before, but yeah. Thank you for the emotes. It's a saying. Too many chiefs? What does it mean? Too many chiefs. Oh, yeah. Too many chiefs, not enough Indians. Huh? Yes, yes. I mean, I don't think there's too many priests either. They have a point in which, but I think it's a point that it's missing the origin of it. There are very few priests, and there are too many. But because there's this church, and they're like, oh, they having to close churches in this town and this town. It's like, well, If there was a lot of people going to church, then out of those people there would be more priests. So the issue is really that, yeah, there's not enough Indians. The problem is not that there's not enough chiefs. Too many leaders, not enough food source to the actual work. Yeah, exactly. And again, they all play a part, obviously. Like, I'm not trying to say like priests don't do the work. It's just they gotta lead, and it's like, but if there's nobody to lead, it's like, again, yeah, it's what you're saying. There's not that many need for leaders. Now, by a random thing, there's actually this really cool theological library near me that has a tons of interesting stuff. So I'm getting reminded of it. Oh, that's cool. You should go explore it if you get called, you feel the call to explore it. Yeah, I myself should read more theology in general. I was talking to a priest actually recently about it. I mean, we're just catching up and stuff because I used to go to these camps that he would organize and with other kids and stuff. And yeah, and we were talking about the faith and stuff, and yeah, he was asking me, it's like, what you reading and stuff. I'm like, oh, not much. I mean, the most recent thing I read was like Story of a Soul by Saint Therese of Lisieux, which she's a doctor of the church. And then I've read some writings from Saint Bonaventure and other church doctors, but I should read more. There's so much richness. Yeah, you've been there. Oh, nice. Original copy of the King James Version English Bible in their collection. Oh, that's cool. Mr. Juanito here would love it. He loves like cool editions of the Bible and stuff. I'm not much of an expert in any of that. But what I find interesting to read, it's, yeah, doctors of the church or fathers of the church and their views on the Christian life and things like that. I'm gonna head off to bed soon. Oh yeah. I mean, we are getting to that mark too. We should be ending the episode soon. Great chatting. Thanks for sharing. Esteban San who's Cordero Catholic a little bit more. Yeah, nice for me too. I don't even know who he is sometimes. I saw a sample of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Oh, that's really cool. Yeah. Where are you staying at? Like Kishon? I forgot. The custom of an infertile wife correlating her husband with a concubine to produce children is widely attested in ancient Near Eastern law. All the Syrian marriage contract states that the wife must provide her husband with a concubine if she does not bear children within 2 years. Wow. Yeah, again, this is why it's like, if you look at things in context, what they're doing is not really that crazy beyond the fact that they just mistrust in the Lord. Texas, yeah, nice. Becoming the center of traditional Catholicism. It is not surprising that Hagar looks down on Sarah. Ancient Near Eastern legal practice addresses such cases of insolent slaves and allows disciplining on them. Use an example of intolerable behavior of maid servant when she outs her mistress. The Lord saying a manifestation of God in human form. The person is identified with God. Ishmael, in Hebrew, the name means God has heard. It is the same Hebrew verb that is translated heeded in the next clause. In other ancient Near Eastern texts, the name commemorated the divine answer to the parents' prayer to have a child, but here it is brought in to mean that God has heard Hagar's plight. This seems to me to describe God's special care for those in need, alongside against the face. So it is used for the lands of Ishmael's descendants. It can be say in opposition to, but here more likely means that Ishmael's settlement was near but not in the promised land. God who sees me, Hebrew El Roi, is multivalent, meaning either God of seeing extends protection to me, or God sees, which can imply seeing human suffering. What commentary are you reading? I like the look of it. You talking about this? Yeah, this is coming from this. Yeah, where did I find this book? Harper Bibles is the author. Let's see where I can find. Okay. Yeah, I think this is it. I just search for the ID. So if I now grab this and I send it to you, they should do the work, right? Let me send that. Bir Lahairoi. Possible translations and the name of the well include Spring of the Living One who sees me. Yeah, no problem, brother. The well of living sight, or the one who sees me lives. The priestly source gathers the major motifs of the story so far and sets them firmly within a covenant context. The word covenant occurs 13 times. There are links to the covenant with Noah in this chapter, promised progeny, and our instructions about circumcision repeat the promises of the son to Sarah and distinguish this promise from that to Hagar. Describe Abraham's carrying out the commands, the Almighty traditional rendering of Hebrew El Shaddai, which is peace favored. Good night, brother. Good night. Hey, Cordero, what was your answer to the question? I might have missed it. Wait, to what question? What question, Bobby? Welcome, by the way. Abram and Abraham are merely two forms of the same name, both meaning the father is exalted, another variant form of Abiram. Additional high in the form Abraham is explained by Bobby. Oh, we read that already. Circumcised, we saw that. Would I rather have control over my life or let God bless me? Oh yeah, I guess it's these questions that I placed to initiate conversation. Thank you for addressing it. Yeah, I mean the answer, I mean it's your answer to give. It's really like when I put those questions is kind of to meditate on when I read this before I started the stream and stuff when we read it together. It's kind of the point. I don't know at what point you're going to stream, but basically what we read in these chapters is how Sarai at that point, who's been promised a child, and Abraham too, and Sarah is like not getting the child for 10 years. So she's like, have the child from my slave. And then from there on, and that causes the birth of Ishmael, which then Sarah gets in a fight with the slave and then expels the slave, and then God has to kind of bring everything back together and remind Abram that he's having a son with Sarah as much as he doesn't want to believe it, and that he just has to wait, and he will have that son and be named Isaac and have that. So I guess the question was arising from to just so that people could reflect on the idea of how often this happens to us. I mean, I can relate to it, which is like we come to an understanding with God, and it's like those moments in which we feel close to God, and we're like, okay, I'm gonna trust you, I'm gonna do things your way, I'm gonna just be patient and let things play out. But then things start to get complicated, and then we start to not trust, and we start to just be like, I gotta do, and then we feel tempted to move away from the commandments, to move away from the trust in God, and we do things our own way, right? And then how things don't play out well. It's like at first it seems like it is the solution, but we always kind of have a feeling that, I mean, we might not even like notice that feeling, but whatever the case, there's a moment in which we fall away, we eat of the apple, we do things our own way, and then we find ourselves in a mess that then God has to come and rescue us from, and then we then again recognize that it's God that we must trust, and again we make a promise, and again we have to make that choice again. So yeah, something like that. Like yep, yeah. I mean, I love that Saul and David, but I really like the idea. I really like David's approach to the whole thing, which is beautiful. Of the idea is like even, and it's the same thing as God's approach here with Ishmael, which is like even if you turn away, I will remain loyal to the covenant or loyal to the promise. And David is like, I will not hurt the anointed of the Lord. You know what I'm saying? Even though the anointed of the Lord is trying to kill me, even though the anointed of the Lord is not following what he's supposed to do, he still is the anointed. And that's what God says here too, what I'm saying? It's like, even though you didn't do what you're supposed to do, even though you didn't trust me that you will have a son with Sarah, you had a son with Hagar, and now Ishmael is born. I'm not gonna just kill Hagar and Ishmael. I'm not just gonna let them die. I will stand by my word. And I said that your descendants will be many, so I will make many descendants of Ishmael and of Isaac. So I think that's the most beautiful thing that, I mean, not the most, again, everything is very beautiful about God, but I think something that I find very beautiful, which is what we, I think, must learn to do in our own lives, is when other people do us harm, when other people, don't uphold their word. I mean, it's so easy for us to just be like, well, you didn't do the right thing, you are the one that's wrong, you are the sinful one, you are the one that, and to just use that against them. It's like, if we see God, that's not what he does ever. He creates more. If somebody harms you, or somebody, like, I think it was today actually in the gospel, it says like, if they take your cape, give them the tunic. If they take from, if they, the whole thing is they strike you the other cheek. The whole point of that is not that you want people to hit you, or that you want people to take things from you. Is that what the powerful thing to do is to just create again, to make a new cape, to get up again, and let them have the cape, let them do the wrong. And because that way they can realize, do the good to your enemy, because love your enemy, because that's what your enemy needs. And your enemy just being somebody that opposes you, because it's not like they are a bad person per se, they're just making a mistake. The same way Abraham is not a bad person in the sense that Sarah is not a bad person. They just become desperate, and then they take matters into their own hands. The guy that steals your cape, or whatever you want to say in that respect, he just probably really needed a cape and couldn't trust the Lord anymore and be like, I'm not going to do the right things because I'm not getting the cape that I need to be warm. So I'm just going to steal it. So in that moment of desperation, they make a mistake, and we must be as graceful as God is and be like, okay, take the cape. It's fine. We'll do it again. 1 Samuel 13, 7-14. Check it out. Let me see. But yeah, on that note, I'm going to read a little bit more. Yeah, there's 2 more notes. Sarah and Sarah are variant forms of the same name, both meaning princess. Nice. Laughed, Yishak, which is also the Hebrew form of the name Isaac. Oh, wow, interesting. Similar explanation of the name are given. So because he laughed at the Lord, that would be ironic. All right, let's see what you sent here, and then we're gonna close the segment, the show for tonight. Oh, why you gotta don't give it to me in English? How do I just? Can I get it in English? New American Bible. This 7:14. Oh, the Hebrews crossed the Jordan into the land of Gad and Gilead. Saul, however, held out in Gilgal, all his army trembling in fear behind him. He waited 7 days until the appointed time Samuel had set. But Samuel did not come, and the army deserted Saul. He then said, "Bring me the burnt offering and communion offerings." Then he sacrificed the burnt offerings. King Saul reproved. As he finished sacrificing the burnt offering, there came Samuel. So Saul went out toward him in order to greet him. Samuel asked him, "What have you done?" Saul explained, "When I saw that the army was deserting me and you did not come on the appointed day, and that the Philistines were assembling in Michmash, I said to myself, now the Philistines will come down against me at Gilgal, and I have not yet sought the Lord's blessing. So I thought I should sacrifice the burnt offering." Samuel replied to Saul, "You have acted foolishly. Had you kept the command the Lord your God gave you, the Lord would now establish your kingship in Israel forever. But now your kingship shall not endure. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart to appoint as ruler over his people because you did not observe the Lord's command." Yeah. Once again, that's what we keep seeing in the Bible. God makes a promise to us, and we just cannot keep ourselves from just waiting in the Lord and trusting. But bro, again, so relatable because it happens to me and it happens to all of us, which is that we continue to do that. We continue to want to take things into our own hands. Whatever the case, let's just, that's the note we're going to close on, Whatever in your life that you feel called to do, just remember that in whatever tribulation you find yourself, whatever obstacle, continue to do what God wants you to do, like do the commandments and be patient. And if it seems like it's not working out, still don't deviate, don't fall into sin, don't fall away from God, because God will come to the rescue when it's time. And yeah, that's it for today. Thank you guys for being here. If you're watching this on YouTube, just comment what you thought about this and what you think about God and about the covenant and about the promises that he makes us and how we fall away from them and we mistrust. And again, or any other thoughts that you have, or even your own answer to the question, would I rather have control over my life or let God bless me? And yeah, if you like the video, just press the like button. If you want to share it with other people, go ahead and share it. That would be great. So other people can share their own opinion on this as well. And if you want to see more, just subscribe. And even if you want to, be part of the show, you can always be live with us every Monday at 11 p.m. Spanish time, which is GMT +1, and participate here like these great people we have tonight in the chat. And yeah, thank you everybody, and God bless you.